Hello, everyone. It is January 14th, and this is the editor group monthly meeting. So diving in, I dropped a few direction item updates. I figured we'd just go through the agenda, and some of them I already know the answers to, but I just figured I'd give a chance for you to address the whole group and give updates. Paul, I had a couple first for you, if you wanted to run through them.
Yes. Update the code sandbox package with service worker. So this is blocked by an infrastructure issue because the assets for running code sandbox on the browser are hosted in a separate environment. So yeah, that's the last bit we're really waiting on. So if there's anything that we could do to help that along, that'd be great. But it sounds like it's just up to the powers that be there.
Yeah, and for the record, slipping because of that dependency is not a big deal. I just need to know for release post writing. So I'll push that out to next release, and we'll monitor the infrastructure issue closely. And yeah, if anything we can do to help move that along, that would be great. Let me know if there's any people I need to bother on Slack or something.
Yeah, I'll probably be, pinging them once a week, which sounds like it's a, just acceptable level of nagging. So, and then the next issue about the web ID showing a warning message when user opens ID and can't push code. I saw the comment you left on the issue that so currently the way the issue is written is it talks about if the user can't push the code, somehow ends up on the IDE page, they're going to be really disappointed when they start making changes and try to go to commit and it doesn't work. So we want to alert them beforehand. But it turns out, based on this most recent comment, users may be able to push code, but it has to be a signed commit. And the web IDE will not sign your commits. So that would be problematic. And then I would imagine there's a number of other business use cases we may have where the user can push code, but maybe can't still use the web ID or something. So that is a bit of scope change. That's not going to affect the original proposal. I don't think it's going to be handled by the condition we're checking for the way this is originally implemented. But I'm going to double check that scenario since you brought it up, and I'll check it today and leave an update on that comment. So if for that specific scenario, it should be a quickish fix, but I imagine it won't be in the 13.8 release. But we might not have to create a whole separate issue for it. I might be able to just create a quick follow-up MR about it, but I'll keep you posted on that issue.
Yeah, thank you. I came across that, and as I mentioned in the agenda, as we were having that discussion, I remembered that we had slated that small improvement, and hoped that maybe we could mimic the behavior at least, if not have the same code path solve for both problems. But yeah, please keep me updated. I don't mind making another issue and doing it later, but if it is something you can just knock out while you're in there, then certainly let me know.
Cool. And that's it for me. Dennis is next.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, the POC to replace editor implementation web ID with editor lite. Yes, it has been delivered. Things surprisingly still work. Work pretty cool. I had to clean up the implementation of the editor. Like, it's not the 100% like take whatever we have in WebID and move it to editor lite. I had to clean up some things that really didn't make sense, especially considering in relation to the diff computations. So that might sound dangerous. I know Paul will be skeptical about this change, but that's why I pinged him and Himanshu in the POC to take a look. But from what I've tested in different scenarios with merge requests, with simple editing, like diffs still work. So technically, we trimmed down the implementation of the editor for WebID, wrapped it into the editor Lite extension, and now we have performance boost as well, like between 14 and 25% on the page load, on the editor WebID load. And the implementation work that has to follow this POC with real tests and things like this has been planned and linked to the original issue. Most of those issues are assigned for 13.9, and some preparation work has been merged already now in 13.8. So yeah, we are doing good there, I think.
That's great. I personally was not as expecting as dramatic or noticeable performance improvement, so I'm very happy to see that.
Obviously, like that's that was like I didn't expect it either. I had a hope because not because Editor Lite is so much more performant than the original WebID implementation is, but simply because I've spent some time digging into what we do in WebID's editor implementation and found a lot of things that technically, like, we create huge objects that we do not use really. So we just consume a lot of memory for things that are not used anymore. I assumed these were the artifacts from like the very, very first implementations of the editor. So it was a really nice feeling to just get rid of those and still see the things working fine. So that's the main thing. Like, we do not create large objects that we do not use. That's the main cause of the performance boost, I guess. But otherwise, it's still the same Monaco under the hood.
Really cool.
Chad.
And just, so it goes, so it's not news when you watch the kickoff video that I'm recording, but this moving forward into 13.9, yeah, we're in 13.9. That'll be a key item to bring over the finish line. So we'll keep moving on that. And I'm encouraged and
if you expect me being disappointed, that's the wrong impression. I'm really excited about that.
Just letting everybody know. Yeah. All right. I think Chad was next.
Chad is next.
Yeah. Yep.
Hey, so my internet's been a little bit flaky, so let me know if I'm turning into a robot. So yeah, spam. This is one of those pulling a thread on a sweater thing. And early on, I talked to Charlie about it, and on the back end, and she like set the stage for it, because when I picked up this issue, I was like, what do we even need to do here? It's really unclear, and I spent a lot of the holidays just trying to wrap my head around where all this code is, and she said, oh yeah, this stuff is still not in good shape. It's so all over the place. It's good that you're continuing these refactors. So the status of it is the proof of concept is done. It works. Fran's been giving lots of good comments on the specific to the snippets backend implementation, but that's good. And Paul helped me a lot with the front-end view implementation, and I think that's really in a good spot. It's modern. It uses the native JavaScript capture API. It uses pajamas. It's pretty clean. But trying to clean up the back end, it's basically a ton of legacy code debt that's coupled to the old REST controller-centric implementation that issues still use. But both it and snippets have, even though it's still on rest, they move forward to a view world, and most of that code I think is not needed and could be moved over to this modern approach, even with the still rest implementation. And as you can see in the doc there, as I'm exploring this, there's some really concerning things that I'm finding that in my list of heuristics that I go through in my head, like, is this code that I care about? Is this something I really needs to be refactored? It's like, is this going to get used in other places in the app? Does this have security implications? Like, all of those things are like, yes. So I'm taking the time to refactor this. And with Darva yesterday, and of course when Roman comes back, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going deep on cleaning up a lot of this stuff now that I can see what needs to be done. And then also, one of the files I was working on, I was just happened to look at the history, and there's like an actual page in the docs that is about like instance variable cop that, and this cop is disabled, and in our live docs it points to this piece of code and says this is bad, it really should be cleaned up. And I'm like, yeah, probably I should do that before I start refactoring it further. So it's just more pulling a thread. So that's where this is. As I said, the POC is done, and I could say, okay, I'm just going to ram that in, put some minimal test coverage, and call it done. Or I could say, it took me a good week and a half, 2 weeks to wrap my head around this stuff. I'm going to make it better and try to kill off a lot of code debt. So that's what I'm leaning towards now. And aside from that, there's still this just dribbling of DRI stuff, like the ongoing timeouts on about GitLab.com, and there's movement from Sid and on down at their offsite of getting somebody else to take that over. But that's not a ton of time, but it's also, for me personally, getting interrupted and dealing with that stuff really messes with my ability to get into flow and deep work, which I have to do trying to wrap my head around these refactors. So that's sort of where I am. And it's dragging out, but I think it's going to end up in a good place. But likely not by this release. I will say that now.
Cool. Yeah, no problem. Understood. And thanks for the update. Enrique, on searching settings.
We delivered the small proof of concept of searching inside the project settings general page. So this was implemented as a reusable component, view component that we can easily include in the other settings pages. So yesterday I organized, with the help of Eric, some epics with issues to integrate that component in the other settings pages. So yeah, that's about it.
Thanks for creating all those issues, by the way. They're going to be very helpful for tracking the work, and it was a lot of them, but then we have a lot of settings views. I'm looking forward to this. The goal would be to try and get as many of these as we can in 13.9, given how relatively straightforward it is to add them on the page. I was looking at it and I was trying to think if it's worth me even trying to help out on a couple just to learn the process, but I don't want to slow anybody down. Luckily, it looks like we can sort of do this in parallel and submit MRs for one or many, depending on what you want to pick up. So I encourage anybody, if you're looking for a break and want a quick MR, go ahead and pick up one of those issues. You don't even need to wait for 13.9.
My turn?
Yeah, Fran.
Okay. I was able to merge the whole epic regarding repository storage move before my vacation. There is only one remaining issue. It's already assigned to Anastasia, who is in QA. in order to create the integration test that we also have for projects when they move the repository storage. I am dealing with the same issue for group wikis. The problem is that even though we can reuse a lot of the code that was refactored before, they are quite specific because they are a repository container, but not because it's really the wiki. They don't have a repository, so we cannot really extrapolate directly the same approach that we have with projects, for example. So I have a POC working. I'm discussing this approach with Marcus Kohler, who implemented group wikis, and see how we can move forward. Once I have the approval, I will create the issues on the Epic and start working on them.
I have a question.
Sure.
So I keep hearing these themes of like there's the main, project repositories, but then there's like wikis have their own repository and snippets have their own repository. And that came up yesterday in terms of like the editor light. Like how do we, have it work the same way across these things? Is there like a larger effort, and I don't have any context, I've just seen your issues go by, to like make a different facade in front of these where it's less of an impact that they are different repos and have to be handled one off? Or is that even possible? I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know.
The problem is that we are dealing with a ton of legacy code. So, for example, if you go, even for projects, if you go to your GTK installation repositories directory, you will see that there you have a directory called hash. In that hash directory, you have all the project, yes, you will have several directories. Each directory represents a project, and inside each directory, you can find several repositories. You can find the project repository, you can find the design management repository, and also the wiki repository. So in projects, in the wiki container, we have, in the project container, we have three kinds of repository who are totally independent, because depending on which repository you are accessing, for example, we have even different policies to access it because we have different visibility levels. But the legacy code here is that before these hash directories, we used to store projects by their path. And then we try to migrate them, but still we have to support this whole system because we still have clients that has this whole system. So it's not really intuitive. And there are also several representations of these repositories. For example, to give you a bigger picture. So projects, the project directory, inside the project directory, you will find the project repository, the design management repository, and the wiki repository. Okay. For snippets, each snippet directory, which is stored in a different place than projects, each snippet only have one repository. It doesn't matter if the snippet is a personal snippet or a project snippet, it only has one repository. And now we recently, or the former knowledge team, implemented group wikis. And group wikis are following the former approach. So if you create a group wiki, in the repositories directory, you will find a directory called groups. So that group directory is intended to store the wiki directory and any other repository attached to groups. For example, if we, in the future, want to add design management for groups, it will go to that directory. And each one of those resources has different abilities, different policies.
And the problem is, like, on-premise customers, there's the way they have it is coupled to this, so it's the hard type of debt to get rid of.
Yeah,
You have to
exactly.
migrate all that.
And we have, and that is quite dangerous, because we have really big repositories, really big repositories, really important repositories, and you have to deal also with the scenario where those repositories belong to really big companies that doesn't stop at all working. So because they have they have employees working in different time zones, so that migration can be quite troublesome. So it's really hard to find a facade to all this.
Makes sense.
You will realize soon. Don't worry.
I figured it was something like that. I was just curious. It seems like we're doing a lot of rework, but it's the type that you can't really avoid.
The problem is legacy here, and the pace we have. We have to move fast, and sometimes it would have been better to stop and see the bigger picture, or see if we can design the bigger picture. But
Yeah, which is what I'm trying to do for the spam related stuff, because I'm thinking we're gonna want to use this in other areas of the app eventually. Like, this is something that we want to clean up and make it not take 2 weeks of staring at the code, at least for me, to start to wrap my head around it.
no, yeah, I mean, I think you're doing great, because I don't, as I told you in a comment, I hate that we introduce concerns or modules that depends on objects that are already defined in the context, or because you cannot really move them straightforward because they are dependent of the context. So I think it's great, that kind of refactor.
Okay, well, thanks for all the updates. I want to keep mine short, which I said last time and then used up all the time, but I just want to give one strategic product update on the rich text editor, mostly because we just had a really great review of our opportunity canvas on Monday, and it went really well. We got some great feedback from the design and product leadership, and not that that's really a way to get formal approval, like we are the DRIs, but given something of this size and importance, they give us the go-ahead. The opportunity in front of us, as we've talked about, is to build a consistent and reusable Markdown editing experience and apply it across all of GitLab, or anywhere we're editing Markdown at least, and from there offer catered experiences per category, per feature, by extending the editor itself or extending the Markdown parser to support different languages and things of that nature. It's not just for static site editor. And in fact, as the note in the agenda mentions, the strategy I would like to take is not to worry too much about static site editor in the near future, at least like maybe this quarter, right? So I think our primary goal right now is to get the foundations in place and potentially start with wikis, although that is open to discussion. If anybody has strong feelings that it would be easier or quicker or more valuable to do it elsewhere, my feeling is that wikis are, they have enough users that we will be able to get feedback quickly. The use case is slightly more narrow as far as editing and committing Markdown changes within the wiki format. And it certainly would be something that wiki users could derive value from and have been asking for a long time. So while we're not charged as a group to invest heavily in wiki right now, it does seem like the best playground for us to test this MVC.
That was part of the promise of the reorg, that we could make these types of decisions. It's like,
exactly,
here's where we want to dog food it, because we own all the editing experiences.
Exactly. And I feel like it's also going to be less disruptive to users if there are rough edges, right? Like we can put it behind a feature flag and then we can roll it out, and then people could, we can default it to not be, we can make it not the default at first and people can opt into it or something like that. We'll figure out the deployment strategy. But the wiki seems like a great place to start, knowing that we would likely move towards the MR issue description, epic descriptions, and potentially comments shortly after. And the reasoning behind not jumping right in the static site editor, not only because we have relatively minuscule monthly active users right now, is that there would be a not insignificant amount of work to reach feature parity with the current static site editor after implementing the editor itself. So we've built a few features into the static site editor that we would have to replicate or port over. And even a milestone or two of that to slow us down from getting feedback is probably not worth it. Ultimately, this editor is the path for the static site editor to gain adoption and to grow outside of just supporting middleman. So we will want to return to that for sure. Strategically, that'll be important for us, but probably next quarter or second half of the year, if I had to guess. Going back to the agenda to make sure I hit all my points. So I talked to Roman about this. I want to carve out some time in the upcoming milestone to get our real iteration plan, our deployment strategy, epics and issues all nice and organized, and so that we can start writing the first real MRs in 13.10. I'm not going to hold anybody right now to estimates on, we haven't committed to when it would ship or anything like that, but we'd like to, move pretty fast. I think it'll be one of our top priorities as a group over the next quarter. We will still have to balance settings and navigation work, probably still about half of our time on that. And all of our other categories will not be forgotten, but this is one of the more important strategic efforts over the next few months, few milestones. And yeah, I don't know, questions about that or any other comments related to moving forward with it?
I fully support the idea of using the wikis as an entry point. And I think that given that the issue description and merge request description pictures are not part of our stage, it's probably a great idea to start building a rich text editor that already supports the GitLab flavor markdown before we start suggesting other stages to adopt the rich text editor.
Yeah,
I left a link to the GitLab flavor markdown documentation that probably gives a clear picture of what we will have to support to say that we built an editor that supports all of the features that we provide in Markdown.
Yeah,
it's a great spec.
To Enrique's point, not focusing on the static site editor and instead focusing on that eliminates a lot of other areas of complexity we had. Like, it's not GitLab flavor markdown. The whole, it's a Jamstack. We have external users using different static site editor or deploy tools. All of those concerns just go away with wikis, so we can focus just on the rich text editing experience and how that fits with Editor Lite.
Yeah, and I'd also say that as opportunities to extend into our other categories show up, like if it makes sense to allow people when they're editing a markdown snippet to use this or opt into it or default to it, I think we could explore that. yeah, I think the static site editor will come in time, but we need to get a good foundation for the editor itself first. And this, yeah, I don't think anybody's disagreeing, so we don't need to belabor that point. But yeah, I'm very excited about this, and I'll link to the opportunity canvas if you didn't get a chance to review it. It's kind of, a lot of product-y stuff and strategy related. But it kind of puts it kind of quantifies why this might be relatively important for us as a group, as far as like reach, when you compare it to the investment we might make to build a really great future for the static site editor versus something that's more reusable. I mean, we could be talking about something where we're charting 300, 500,000 monthly active users interacting with this editor once we've got it implemented in all places. So we've got the opportunity to reach a wide number of people with a really well-defined architecture and approach. And so I think just moving full steam ahead on it is our best bet. All right, I'll turn it over to open discussions. This one, Dennis, you want to review?
Yeah, we discussed it yesterday during the backlog refinement session, but just to bring it to the wider audience, like technically, yes, the idea of combining the review and commit tab in WebID, because just commit tab doesn't make sense when you're reviewing things that much unless you make the changes. And the review tab doesn't make sense at all when you're editing the things. So that's the issue linked. Oh no, there is no issue linked there. Okay, that should be linked there. Let me just find it. Where is it? Like the backlog refinement. Oh, okay. I think I will merge. Yeah, okay, I'll add the link later. So the discussion is ongoing. So yes, Paul made a really good point about people willing to edit the things while they are reviewing the merge request. And this is exactly what we discussed yesterday during the backlog refinement session. So yes, we are aware of that, and we'll just keep this in mind. And as mentioned yesterday, as the very first step, we can just start with hiding those tabs, like because our URL already tells us whether we are reviewing or we are editing the things. Oh, thank you, Eric. So
Just barely beat me to it.
So we are we are able to identify whether we are in the MR review mode or we are in the edit mode. So when we are in the edit mode, we just hide the review tab, and when we are reviewing the MR, we hide the commit tab by default. But since the state is still there, once the user goes to the edit tab, makes the change, and we identify that there is a change, we do show the commit tab again. So it's just like gradual user experience. We start really basic, and then we just, in response to users' action, we might expand this functionality. So it's just the review tab now when you're editing is completely broken. It's just not usable at all. The same thing unless you make changes while reviewing NMR, the commit tab and the whole commit button make no sense at all. So those things would just not loading those by default in these two scenarios will, first of all, improve the performance. It will improve the user experience, in my opinion. So that's an interesting thing to discuss, I guess. Yeah. Do we have any questions? Do we want to discuss this or?
I'd just highlight also, check out there's an earlier issue when we
Yeah.
talked about this some months ago. Check out issue created by Mike Nichols.
Mhm.
And he has a different proposal too. But yes, currently us having 2 file trees and like it doesn't make sense the way it is right now. But we would want to make sure that we preserve the ability to view diffs and view MR diffs. And we've talked about Himanshu's. There's other comments and discussions we've had with Himanshu about like being able to like right click on a file and say view diff and like having that be a different tab as opposed to like a tab on the actual editor pane like you would in Visual Studio Code, being a much better experience. So yes, I think anything we could do to simplify what's going on there is great. But I think the challenge is going to be is doing it without getting rid of the current features of being able to view the diffs. But I think it's doable. It's just, I think that would be an interesting proposal.
But the diffs won't go anywhere, right? So when you're editing the code, the commit tab will be there. It will still show you the diffs. While if you're in the merge request review mode, you go to the review tab and it still shows you the diff, right? So the diffs don't go anywhere technically, but also keep in mind, after we move WebID to Editor Lite, and now I switch to the Editor Lite promotion mode again. So once we switch to the Editor Lite, we will be able to just do the live preview, or like to do even live diff preview for the files while you're editing or doing things or on request, just the same way as there is the POC of live preview for Markdown files in Editor Lite. So that's going to be like, we will be able to provide this in context of editing. So you're editing the file and you click, okay, yeah, I want to see the diff. What did I change on this particular file? And you get this diff right there without going to the commit tab.
Cool. Yeah, if those are all there, that sounds awesome.
So one question I had, so Michael's comment about not being a fan of hiding and showing UI elements, but rather he would have disabled states or empty states. If I'm understanding you, Dennis, it's because these two states are completely mutually exclusive and we can detect them deterministically. That's why it's okay to combine them into one, and initially through this hack of just having a flag.
So technically when we hit WebID, we have the ID router sitting and dispatching, like defining whether we go to the merge request review mode or we go to the edit mode kind of thing. So we know what scenario we are following early on in the process. So based on that, we can set any flag or some state store state that would tell us what elements to show. So we conditionally show and hide elements on the page. This means that we might involve the conditional loading for those panels, conditional loading for the components required to bootstrap that or another view. So that's technically possible because we have very different URLs for merge request review and for editing repository files.
I think you went on mute.
Oh, okay. And now, what part did I talk to myself?
No, just
we haven't heard you for 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. No. Did it answer the question, Chad?
Yeah. So, I guess to ask the question explicitly, there's no functionality that is going to be unavailable to users by taking this approach of just toggling back and forth between. There's no state that the user or the editing could be in where they won't be able to do something that they could previously do.
No, ideally, obviously that shouldn't be the case. Like the only thing that won't be available to the users, for example, when they edit the repository files, the broken review tab won't be available to them. But I think this is much better scenario than providing this view and it does nothing. It just confuses users.
When you say broken review tab, is it broken like today? Like, are there bugs we need to fix? Or
No. There are no bugs. It's just like
from a UX
it
flow,
just doesn't
make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Like it's technically
It's a diff
like
with no diffs, right?
Yeah, it's diff without diff technically. Yeah. So it shows the diff editor where two windows are identical, and it's called review. So
it's super confusing, and the file tree component is like our most expensive thing that we render in Vue, I think. And so having two of those doesn't make sense. Yes, yeah. I'm
and code complexity, like the left nav collapse, like that was just the exploratory testing, and all of that other surface area of having another tab is a big deal.
Yeah,
well, there are a lot of things in WebID that are really big deal, and like the complexity of some solutions there is just like overwhelming.
Yeah.
So
no, that'd be really cool. Thanks for resurrecting the discussion, Dennis. I think it would be amazing to do some bigger cleanup on it. And I think doing that would even make it more attractive to more users, being like, okay, this looks way more attractive now, and that sounds exciting.
Okay, now Paul, I think it's your point now.
Yeah, I know we're a little over in time. I'm going to create an issue for us to have more, I think a merge request probably for us to have more discussion on this. And the merge request to our team handbook page, but having some visibility on like the community contributions across GitLab. I hardly ever see community contributions for our editor team code, and I'm not entirely sure why that is. But I think some hypothesis of why that might be would be that our issues may lack visibility. Contributors just aren't seeing them, or the issues aren't very community contributor friendly, or community contributors start picking up issues, but then the code's not friendly. I don't think it's the code's not friendly, because I think most of GitLab code can be a little unfriendly, but community contributors still contribute to it. So I think that there's something to gain with how we write our issues, thinking about the community contributor as almost the primary audience. And so I have some thoughts on this. I'm going to create an issue about it, but I want to bring up the discussion for any other thoughts, especially because my perspective is certainly limited. What do you think?
I think it's good, and I think Eric's push to get a clear hierarchy of epics and have that align with the direction, so people can get a clear view of like, where does this fit into the bigger picture, and know where they're going, even though the code is always going to be the state that it's in. At least knowing the bigger picture will help people be more approachable to it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, visibility and like comprehensive hierarchy of issues and epics, as well as just well-defined problems and potential solutions, would be helpful there. And we have a wide breadth of surface area to clean up, but as we do that, I hope that we'll see more.
Because that saves you from having to put like all of the context in the issue. You could say like, just refer to a heading and an epic or some ancestor epic that explains what you're talking about.
What I kind of do hope this does too, though, is I think our team has a lot of context for like, oh, we want to do this thing. Like, we almost already know where it's going to be. But I hope for myself, this helps me, like, if I'm not including a line of code in an issue, like I'm writing an issue probably more for our team, which I think is an anti-pattern. I'd rather do the investigation, include some lines of code in these issues. So I feel like we'd even have better confidence with how we weight things. And when we weight things, it's a huge disappointment to community contributors if they pick up a weight 1 or 2 issue, and for them it's actually like it's a weight 1 or 2 for us because we're super familiar with it, but for them, like maybe it was, it just discouraged them from contributing to GitLab at all. So I kind of when I'm proposing, and I'm going to try to add to our handbook page, our team handbook page, is writing issues with outside contributor first in mind, and the exponential benefit of scaling that contributor base could be really exciting.
I don't have hard data on this, but a pattern that I've seen in community contributions is that users are usually driven or motivated to make a community contribution when they use a feature or they really, really desire that feature. So perhaps something that we could do is, I don't know, maybe get some data of what are the features that they really want, and organize that effort in a way that they can contribute in small improvements or in an incremental way. I'm trying to understand if just organizing the work that we have to do is a good motivator for any community contributor to just say, hey, I want to participate on this, or we have to provide other sort of of try to understand what actually is what is driving them to come and provide any sort of value to the application.
Tagging
Really
with
good
the
point.
hackathon label helps. Think about, like, as we're doing the triage and other stuff, think about ones that are easy. Make sure we tag them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Thanks for bringing this up, Paul. I think just to bring it back around to talking about the rich text editor and our growth there, I think my impression and my hope is that we'll be able to rely pretty heavily on our community contributions once that's in place to expand the reach of our static site generator to support other syntaxes and static site editor to support other static site generators and syntaxes. Same thing goes for the wiki if somebody really wants ASCII doc or something like that, and we build it in a way that they're able to contribute. That was one of the primary goals of, or one of the secondary goals, I guess, of our architecture, was building it in a way that we can lean on the community to build out support for things that we might not prioritize, but that those 10 users of that random static site generator that are really passionate about it can contribute support.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I hadn't really been considering, like, there's definitely the flavor of community contributor that's motivated by, what value is this feature going to give to me when it's actually out there. There's also, and this is all gut feelings, but I know that there's also community contributors that are just excited just to contribute to GitLab. And so it's also interesting comparing our issues with just the rest of GitLab, of when someone's just looking for any issue, uh, why are our team's issues maybe passed up? If that's even true, it may not be. So it's interesting. Cool. Thanks for the discussion, and look forward to hearing more from me about it when I create either an issue or a merge request. Thanks.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks again for bringing it up. And with that, we are a few minutes over. So thanks for sticking around. I'll see you all in Slack. Hopefully you enjoy a good Friends and Family Day tomorrow. Take care.